We are in the fifth of 6 teachings where Jesus starts by saying, you have heard it was said. You've heard it was said. And we are coming to understand that the heart of Jesus for his people is just different. And understand this about the people he talked to that day on that hillside for this experience. They were in a pretty much impossible situation. For one thing, their religion made it almost impossible for them to feel good about following God because it was so hard. Another thing is they lived in a very difficult situation legally. Their religion and their cultural laws were really difficult to deal with. So with all 6 of the idioms in Matthew 5, he starts by saying, you have heard it was said. And then he challenges our thinking. And we've already been here with some very difficult situations. He ties anger to murder. Remember that? He talks about adultery and lust. He goes into the idea of divorce. And then last week, Dan talked about truthfulness, about oaths, being people of our word. And really, if you think about it, all of these topics go deep into the idea that we need to live a life that follows actions that are pure and that are noble and good and those things. And so we need to live it. In all these teachings, there's this gap that can exist between our words and then how we really live our lives. So Jesus is really going hard in this topic with us. And here is where he's trying to get us to be different. It's in relationships. How we treat each other, how we treat our fellow human beings. So there's ancient wisdom that he addresses. You have heard that it was said. And then there's some ancient wisdom that he brings up. And then he says, but I tell you, here's a different way to think about that. Now we do this too. You know, we have our own, you've heard it was said statements that come from antiquity that maybe we've changed the meaning of. So for instance, sometimes you'll say, or maybe you've heard said, that you gave someone the cold shoulder. You ever said that or had that said to you? I gave them the cold shoulder. Or they gave me the cold shoulder. What does that mean? Where does that come from? Well, it really is a statement that happened centuries ago where if you had a guest at your house and you had to feed them, you'd give them a cold piece of meat from the shoulder of the mutton, because if you did, you're pretty much saying to them, you can leave now. That's where that came from. Or maybe you said this, I need to butter them up. You ever said that? Or someone's trying to butter me up. Well, where'd that come from? Well, that is from ancient India, where a devotee would throw butter balls at the gods, hoping to get favor from the gods. That's the origin of that. Ever said this? Cat got your tongue? Usually what we're doing, it's a snarky way for us to say to someone, yeah, I got you on that one, didn't I? Yeah, I got you tongue-tied, didn't I? Well, where does that come from? Well, in ancient Egypt, liars and blasphemers' tongues would be cut out and fed to the cats. So, see, your cats, you think they're like these innocent little creatures? They eat tongues, okay? I'm just telling you right now, they'll do that. Here's a dad idiom. Sorry, cat lovers. Here's a dad idiom, a chip off the old block. Ever heard that? Of course, you know that means that a son that resembles his father. But that really is just simply a way that they said, the ancient people would say, a chip off the old block means that it resembles the block it came from. Like it could be a block of stone, it could be a block of wood, whatever. The chip is just a resemblance of that. So modern idioms that really have original intent that maybe have changed. That is what Jesus is dealing with here. And today we're talking about another one of those real human struggles that we all face called revenge. Matthew chapter 5:38, you have heard it was said, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. You've heard that said. You probably said it. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. In other words, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. That's really what that means. The desire for revenge is one of the strongest human emotions. In the upcoming summer preaching series, the one that's going to start at the end of this month, we're doing something called At the Movies. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie in some common movies and the themes of those movies, how they really fit the gospel, and we're going to teach from those. And really, I would say that if you watch about any movie, there's some form of a revenge factor. We're going to watch movies like the Lego Movie and Les Mis. We're not going to watch the whole movie, but we're going to pull clips out of them and teach from the Sermon on the Mount. But by the way, we are not featuring John Wick. We're not doing The Equalizer. And we're not doing the Bourne series. Not that those aren't great movies, but we just couldn't find enough clips we could show in church, so we're not doing those. But every one of those movies and pretty much every other movie that's made, every other action movie that's ever been made has a vengeance factor. You know, getting even or getting more. I'd even say vengeance plus one, because Americans are all about vengeance plus one. And so, Jesus' thesis, you've heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. In other words, he's saying, you've heard it said, get mad, get even, get more. Now, the common way that the ancient cultures attempted to control crime was with some form of a retaliation or retribution law. And this is really what Jesus is referring to. And everyone there would have understood it when he brought it up. Get even, get more. Go back to Deuteronomy chapter 19:21. Show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Vengeance. Leviticus 24:17. Anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death. Anyone who takes the life of someone's animal must make restitution, life for life. Anyone who injures their neighbor's, I lost my point, injures their neighbor's, where am I at? I lost it, sorry. And there's someone's animal, injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. And then he says, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Ouch. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. Whoever kills an animal must make restitution, but whoever kills a human being must be put to death. You are to have the same law for the foreigner and the native born. I am the Lord your God. Now, in our day, justice is usually applied through monetary recompense or through jail time, or maybe both. Now, a couple things, by the way. In their culture, we don't have a whole lot of historical data that suggests that the ancient Israelites were going around poking each other's eyes out, or taking someone's tooth because you broke theirs out, or breaking a leg of someone because your leg got broken. That really wasn't happening. They were probably using similar methods that we do to control crime. And another thing, even if it did happen, Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't use those methods. So what is the purpose of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? The laws were meant to prevent the escalation of hate and to keep feuds moving, spreading out. And it's just to keep us from turning into an ongoing sequel of The Godfather, where you mess with me, you wake up with a dead horse in your bed, and then it just goes from there, It's not it's an attempt to show an unfair and sinful world how to have fairness, knowing that it's one of the hardest things for human beings to be is fair. So it's to attempt to keep the lid on vigilantism. So the common belief that they had and we have today, get mad, get even, get more. So what does he challenge us with? Here's the antithesis. Don't respond to evil with evil. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Now, what does that mean? Do not resist. Because you could read that, and without context, you'd go, that means I got to lay down in front of the tank as it's rolling through Tiananmen Square. It means I got to say to my abuser, my constant abuser, please give me more. Or Does it mean that I can't protect my family, that I can't look out for my property? I don't think it means any of that. Does it mean that when my reputation's being maligned, I shouldn't stand up for myself? It doesn't mean that. No, what it does mean is this. Don't respond to evil by evil. And evil's different than defense. Don't stand with evil is the literal translation. He goes to the heart of who we are. Because we do seek justice and we do want to have fairness and we talk about fairness and everything has to be fair and we work toward fairness. And he's not saying that we shouldn't try to find fair. What he's saying is don't side with evil. Don't side with lawlessness. Don't side with evil and don't side with the bullies. Don't be a bully because you've been bullied. Stand against evil. Okay. Now, we live in this illusion that life is going to be fair. Let me ask by a show of hands. How many of you would say, yeah, life is always fair? Not a one of you. So someone's listening. I like that because you're right. Because in our heart, though, when we get hurt, it's usually because we feel like our fairness has been assaulted. And then what we usually want to happen is punishment. So what Jesus wants us to do is to take seriously the fact that humans are basically horrible at fairness. So in typical fashion, he's already done this with all the other teachings in this section, he says we're going to go deeper. Don't respond with evil against evil. Don't stand with evil. And then the synthesis. These are the examples that he's going to give. He gives 4 great examples. They're all a lot alike, but they all sound a little different. So let's look at these 4 examples of how to apply grace, because that's really who we are. We're to be people of grace. 4 examples. Verse 40. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. You've all heard that. You've all tried to understand it, and we all go, I don't want to do that. I'm with you on that. So what does it mean? Well, I think it means, in a simple phrase, take insult like a man or like a woman. But what does that mean? What does that mean? Now, I think the historical context helps here. So in ancient Middle East culture, when you wanted to make a point about insulting a person or you've been insulted yourself, you would give them a slap on the face. Maybe you've seen that happen in movies, or like the French, I guess, were big on this. I slap you in the face, so that kind of thinking, right? A slap on the cheek, like public rebuke, So it was a pretty common thing. People would have understood that. Someone disagrees with you. It's not that you have different opinions on things. You wouldn't slap just because you don't agree on something. This was a bigger thing, like a insult. And what he's saying is, hey, don't walk away. Turn the other cheek. What does that mean? You just insulted me with a slap. Now I'm going to give you the other shot. See, in his day, everyone would have understood this. A slap was how someone with rank would challenge someone either with lower rank or higher rank or the same rank. So if I give you a backhand slap, that is to say, I'm so much better than you, shut up. If I give you a front hand slap, it's to say, we're equal rank. Now, I know it sounds weird. Why would Jesus even go into this area? He's not telling us to go, we're not supposed to walk around slapping each other, okay? No, we're not doing that. Forget it. What he's saying is, don't walk away. Stand. Stand and stand for the truth here. You insulted me. I'm your rank. I'm not your inferior. I'm here to say that we are facing the same thing together. It's radical to stand in humility and to face someone as your equal. Does that make sense? Okay, now here, these are all can play together, so hang with me. Second example, second idiom, if you will. And anyone who wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Now, what's this all about? Give the shirt off your back. Like, this happened just a few minutes ago. I'm standing out on the patio when people are leaving, and some guy says, I like your shirt. Would you give it to me, please? No, we're not doing that here. Keep your shirt. I know you admire this shirt. You can't have it. I'm just telling you right now. What does this mean? He's talking about legal action where you have lost and someone gets your property, okay? It's a metaphor. There is a good chance that most of the people who were sitting on that hillside on that day when Jesus gave this message, they were people who owned basically two things. They owned their shirt and their tunic. That's what they owned. That was their property. They didn't have a closet full of clothing. They didn't. And they didn't have food. They had to eat day to day, okay? And so these were very poor people, and they had laws to protect them. So for instance, if you sued one of those people and they lost, you could take their tunic, their outer coat, but you could only take it until sunset, and then you had to give it back. Now Jesus says this, very interesting. He says, okay, look, when someone sues you, don't just give them your shirt, give them your coat too. What's that all about? Again, it goes back to dignity. The dignity is this, that if you're standing there and you don't have your tunic on and you don't have your shirt on, by the way, their shirt was down to their knees. If you don't have those two things on, they are standing there holding them. And that puts the pressure on them and their fairness. That's what that means. So again, all these work together. Let's talk about them and we'll get to the conclusion as they pull together. Here's a third thing he says. So if he said, take it like a man, take it like a woman, give them the shirt off your back, go the extra mile. You've said that. You've heard somebody say that. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, Jesus said, go with them 2. Now, the context in that day were that they were a subjugated people. There was a superpower that had invaded their land, Rome, and they were in control legally. And a soldier in that day would carry something like 60, 70 pounds of equipment, a spear, his sword, obviously, all the gear, probably some armor. Then he would have his own personal bag because they're moving all the time. So it was a lot of weight. So there was a law that if he's coming through your territory and he wants you to carry his bag, you have to drop whatever you're doing and you need to carry it for a mile. A mile, that was the law. Couldn't ask him to go any further, just a mile. So I want you to think about this, Dad. So it's Father's Day and you're hanging out with your kids at the lake and or out in your yard, whatever. You're in the yard, you're cooking out, and the invading army's walking down your street, and one of the soldiers points at you and say, hey, you, I need a mile. And so you got to drop everything. You got to pick this guy's gear up. You're going to lug it a mile. Can you imagine how humiliating that would be to have that experience? I mean, but here's the thing. Here's the heart of Jesus, and this is hard to understand. He says, don't just go a mile, go a second mile. Now, why? Why is that? Because he wants you to help. He wants you to go beyond being a pack animal and saying to this person who's asking you to go further, I'll help you. It builds relationship. It's a relationship building. Can you imagine the soldier in that regard? So miles over, he goes, okay, you can go back home. He goes, no, I'll carry it another mile. Can you imagine how that might change the whole relationship there? Now here's one more thing. Give a hand up. Give to the one who asks you. Do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, what is this? Does that mean that, anytime anyone comes to me and says, hey, I want you to give me something because your duty is to give me whatever I ask you? Is that what it is? Is this a mandate to loan stuff to anyone who asks for it? Is this, is this still, you have family members who just always are asking you for more and more and you got to keep opening up the coffers? Is that what this is? No. This is a contradiction or a counteraction, I should say, against the tendency that people have to profit off the backs of other people. They're greedy and they're exploiting people. And we can all think of examples of this, even in our affluent culture. And we are affluent. It's charging unreasonable prices to profit stockholders at the expense of the consumer. It's using interest rates against borrowers to become wealthier yourself, and it puts them in a bind as they can't make ends meet. It's having the ability to help someone with a hand up, but you just say, I'm not going to help, even though I could. Jesus is showing us that generosity is the heart of his kingdom. That generosity is the ruler of our heart. And we're going to see this as we go forward in the Sermon on the Mount. It's so that reconciliation can occur. It's so that we can help each other. So that we can be the best version of ourselves for each other. Now, I will tell you this, the context of all of this. This audience that heard his sermon, they were subjugated people. They were under oppression from an invading superpower. They were people under the control of unreasonable and impossible religious rituals and practices, and they had very little hope of changing that system. So he's saying, we aren't going to change the system. We're going to change ourselves. We're going to respond differently. We're going to go the extra mile. We're going to help when we can. We're going to stand for our dignity by not backing down. We're going to respond to false assault. When we're being taken, we're not going to stand for that, but we're going to do so in a way that's honorable and good. We're not going to respond with evil. The point of this teaching is real change happens in real relationships. He's telling us that it's relationships that change things. So what's the takeaway for us in this? I think it's grace. Let me explain that. Grace is how Jesus changed everything. These people on that day, they didn't know what grace was yet. They knew what law was. They knew what subjugation was. They didn't know what grace was. So Jesus came, and his own life and everything he did made grace available to us. And there are times when I could and you could and the world would argue we should get revenge, we should get back. But when we stand against revenge and we choose dignity and help and fairness and generosity, we are living in grace. So maybe it's listening to someone and they're going off on you, and you respond by saying something like this: I want you to think better of me. I want you to think differently about this thing than you think. I want you to stop thinking about me as a lesser person to you. There's nothing wrong with saying that when you need to say it. Instead of manipulating me, I'm asking you to treat me as your equal, and then talk about that. Here's the challenge. When it's all said and done, the question we have to answer is not, did I get all this right? Because you know what, friend? At least for me, I'm not getting it all right. The answer is, did I learn? Did I grow? Was I willing to change? Because look, there's only one Jesus, and I'm not him. But because of him and his grace, I can be more like him. And that's the challenge here. You know, his original followers, they got this lesson. This was written by Peter decades later, one of his core followers. The end of all things is near, therefore be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply because, listen, love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Oh, man. Take it like a woman, like a man. Give them the shirt off your back. Go the extra mile. Be a generous person. Who can be perfect at that? It's not about perfect. It's about change. Jesus stood against evil. He sacrificed everything so that we could be free. Let's pray as we go into our time of the Lord's Supper. Lord, for our sakes, you took the insults. You were beaten and slapped unmercifully. They ripped the clothes from your back. You were naked on that cross. You took the weight of the endless exploitation of all of our combined evil, and you went not the second mile. You went 1,000,000 miles to change our relationship with God. You faced the unjust accusation in a kangaroo court, carried the weight of our packs of sin, carried our sins to that cross, and crucified them out of love. Love demanded it. You did it. We worship you, Jesus. So just thinking about this message, it makes me realize personally how things can really make sense, and they can have we can be mental about it, we don't want to be people of revenge, stuff like that. But usually when a message like this comes out, whether it's some preacher or whether it's some other relational form that comes at you, there's a person whose name gets inserted. Like there's someone in your life who, man, it's just been really hard to let them go, Maybe there's someone like that in your life, and you're just struggling with the idea that you'd really like to get back at them. So I'm hoping, I like the phrase in the song we just sang, I've got stories I'll live to tell. I've got stories I'll live to tell. Wouldn't one great story that you could tell would be when you identified with the help of the Lord, there's a person, and with his power, I was able to let him go. I want to challenge with that idea this week. Is there someone that you can let go? You can turn the other cheek. You can go the extra mile. Is there someone? Well, I was thinking about this in the back, too. They had a whole bunch of these back there. And I was thinking, really, this is the modern equivalent to giving someone the cold shoulder. So don't get the wrong idea, guys. Take when you leave. We're not giving you the cold shoulder. We're giving you a gift, okay? Happy Father's Day.